if you had nail polish, they would put your hands in jars of spiders. So the spiders would bite your hands, but they kept doing it. And then they would put on lipstick again. They kept doing it. And then they would push their headscarves a little bit further back, a little bit further back, a little bit further back. And, they would go to jail. They would get beat up. Some of them would even be killed. But they said, if we all do this together as women, they can't take all of us.
Welcome to the Deja Blu podcast, where we believe that living a life of magic can be the default. Join us each week as we playfully and authentically dive into the mysteries of life and explore what it truly means to be human. From spirituality, wellness, and all things taboo, we don't hold anything back. So without further ado, let's let the magic unfold. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back to another episode of the Deja Blu podcast. My favorite thing to do is to extract the humans that have changed the course of my life and allowed me to tap into a deeper level of my own magic in their presence. And today is for sure no exception. I am so excited to have this sister queen, epic human, muse, inspiration, guide, and mentor for me through this life. Sahara Rose is joining the podcast. And this woman, not only is she one of my oldest friends, from LA. We go back.
Mm-hmm. You're at my 25th birthday party with this little puppy.
Right,
yeah.
that's right.
Do you remember me?
And I was Charlotte.
Yeah. That's why I had you saved as Charlotte in my phone. Yeah. And then I was like, oh no, this is Blue now.
Blue in the house.
Yeah.
So that's when like for me, that's when I'm like, it goes OG, anyone that still refers to me as Charlotte. And then it's like, from a certain point, the people that have come into my life when like massive shift happened, like the majority of people, and then there's my OGs that were Charlotte, and I'm like, you've been riding with me for a hot minute. And we also just got back from Greece, and we went to Colibri Spirit Festival together, and got to weave some magic over on those incredible pristine islands, and also just from my personal experience from afar, witnessing your consistency, your work ethic, your compassion, your drive, and yet your ability to navigate the feminine energy and the listening at the same time. And it's such a refreshing energy to be around, or to be even just to bear witness, even on social media. Because I think that at some points, like, we have to sacrifice our feminine to hustle, and then, or we sacrifice the hustle completely just fully for our feminine. And I think that you are somebody that has been in my peripherals of like creating a reference point of a really healthy balance between the two. You're a best-selling author, as well as a podcast host, the Higher Self podcast, which is really popular and powerful, and a beautiful watering hole for so many people to come and be able to be nourished by a deep resonance of truth in their being through the guests and through the wisdom that you share. You're also a DJ. That's kind of cool. And I want to learn a little bit more about this whole DJing journey, because there's a part of me that's just like, oh, maybe not in this lifetime. When you're like, you know what, I'm a DJ too now. I'm like, yes, you are. Thank you for allowing yourself to access all the different archetypes that are available for you to play powerfully, ultimately, what it comes down to. Also, you guide people into helping them unlock their Dharma. And so through the different mediums, whether it's Ayurvedic study and the best-selling books, to public speaking, to the podcast, to guiding people through online, through connecting with their Dharma. So there's like so many different, and then of course DJing as well. So there's so many different avenues of expression. But the one thing that I really want to put emphasis on is that your heart is in everything you do. And that's what makes it really irresistible. It's got everything that you touch, everything that you create, whether it's a TikTok dance or she does really funny Instagram reels as well that have some like deeper truth behind them, but they're also like hilarious. And there's humor online that I'm like, eh. And then I'm like, yes. And you definitely have spewed out some content where I've been giving it a giant fat full fuck yes. So this is just some things that from my experience behind the scenes of like me being like, yes, thanks for inspiring me. And it's such a gift to be able to have you on the podcast today. So thank you so much for joining.
Oh, wow. I fully received that intro. I'm like, thank God this is recorded. I'm going to listen to this when I feel down and be like, Blue believes in me. But yes, it's like creativity. When you unlock that channel, it wants to flow in every which direction, which I see you were painting even when I knew you 7+ years ago, like creating it was more at the beginning, but like it was still there. And then the more we allow ourselves to follow that dharmic channel, it's like, oh, now I'm going to express through dance, through poetry, through speaking, through books, through podcasting. And it's like really one and the same. And you know, your dharma isn't any one of those things, but it's the expression and the texture that you bring through everything that you do that makes it you. So excited to be here and sharing some of my dharmic wisdom with you.
And what you just said, it's not about what you do, but it's about who you be while you do it. Yes. This is the core piece. And I think that a lot of us get sold into this idea that it's about what you do. Like if you get the degree, then you can get the good job, and then you can get the money, and then you can eventually buy the house. And then when you get to a certain age, then you can receive the benefits of what it is that you've spent your whole life creating or sacrificing for. But actually recognizing that potentially, and I want to go into what even Dharma means, but to recognize that it's the who we be while we do whatever it is that we do is the actual very magnetic pull into whatever it is that we create. So tell me a little bit more about if somebody is listening to this and they don't know even what the word Dharma means, or alignment, or connecting with living a life basically heart forward. How does one understand the workings of Dharma and connect to their own sense of it?
So the word Dharma has over 16 different definitions in Sanskrit. And one of the most ancient definitions, which came before actually Buddhism existed as a religion, because Buddhism has its own concept of Dharma, before even like Hinduism was considered a religion, like the very ancient Vedic interpretation, which is the Vedas were the eldest recorded texts. So really where yoga and many forms of meditation came from. It essentially means your Dharma is your unique place in the universe. So thinking of the universe as this jigsaw puzzle, and every single one of us is a unique part of that puzzle. And only when we're living our Dharma, our fullest expression, can the beautiful tapestry of the universe come together. So your Dharma to me is your soul's frequency. It's your essence. It's your texture. It's your flavor. And like you said, it goes far beyond what you do, but it's really who you are. And oftentimes in the spiritual space, I see that there's this like battle between doing and being. It's like, you got to choose one. It's like, you know, a lot of people say you're a human being, not a human doing. So it's all only about the being. And then, you know, most of the entrepreneurial space is only about the doing. But to me, your Dharma is you when you're fully alive. And when you're fully alive and fully activated, you can't help but do. So I call this your sacred doing. When you're so deep in your being, you can't help but do. And you're so deep in your doing, you are being. It's one and the same. Like you being here right now. Like you're doing, but you're being. So like, is there a separation? And that's really what your Dharma is. So sometimes your Dharma will take shape in physical manifestations in the world, but then also the thoughts that you have after this conversation, before this conversation, and the way that you woke up and the way that you spoke to your parent, that's also all part of your Dharma. So you're always really living it. And it's not really something that we go out there and find. You know, even this concept of finding your purpose, the language makes it seem like it's something outside of ourselves. But really, you were born knowing it. We all were. As children, we were naturally expressed in who we were. You know, we have different types. We call them different doshas, different archetypes. So some of us are a little bit more of the vata, the air, the creative type. Some of us more of the pitta, the fire, the, you know, if you were the kid, for example, that wanted to like play outside and play sports and like do competitive games, that's more of the pitta, the fire energy. If you were the kid that loved to do art and make up skits and stories and make believe, you were that vata, you're that more air imaginative kid. Or if you were that kid that was more like, you wanted to play house and like pretend to make things and like, you know, pet the animals and very homely and grounded, that's more of the kapha, the earth energy. So, and we're all of these archetypes, all of these elements in different amounts, but we were born with the exact proportion of all three for us to now embody and channel our dharmas. And to me, our dharmas are always here to be a solution for a world's problem. And the world's problem could be a literal like environment or something like that, but it could also be the world just needs to receive beauty in only the way that you can give it. And when we're living our dharmas, we fill that void of the thing that often we wish we had. You know, I believe that we were each born into the microcosm of the macrocosm that we're here to solve. So for example, you may have been born in the microcosm of addiction because you got front row seats into what is it like to be in a family with addiction. What is it like to know the steps of your father if he's drunk versus he's not drunk? What is it like to love someone through addiction, to witness that? There's no way you would be able to truly bring healing and evolution to that topic had you not been born into that microcosm. So for me, I was born into the microcosm of female suppression. You know, my family fled from Iran. My mom literally fled on foot during the Iranian Revolution, the Iran-Iraq War. No woman in my family has ever worked before me. And my grandmothers were in forced child marriages. My grandmother was 11 years old and my grandfather was 27 years old. And she was basically given to him as part of a business deal. So my entire lineage has been like women have been suppressed. They have been property of men. They have not been allowed to have a voice, let alone a purpose. So for me, I was born in this lifetime as this like Shakti empowered queen who knew she was here to create a change. But I had to go through all of, the bondage and deep ancestral lineage and shackles that I'm still going through every single day for me to be here. So the beautiful thing about living our Dharma is when we step into it, it's not just healing for ourselves, but it's healing for our whole lineage. But the thing that's so hard about that is we face layer and layer and layer of conditioning because it's not just from us, it's from our whole lineage.
Wow. It's so refreshing just to get a little taste of your background and the lineage in which you were born into, and also the necessary work to start to transmute to be able to show up who you are today, and the liberation, the freedom, the play, the dancing, the sexiness, the business, like all of the archetypes that you've been able to access, and simultaneously the compassion that is born from a deeper understanding of the context of like, what does it actually look like to move through not just your karma in this life, but also what runs in your DNA, the memory of your mother, the memory of your grandmother that is also embedded within you. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about what does that journey look like when born into a place of suppression, when born into a place where there is an inequality between men and women, and then yet to have such a strong Dharma that runs through you that says, well, actually the suppression, shame, guilt, whatever it is, ends with you. What does it take for one to move beyond validation based off of where the family are validating from, and to self-validate and to actually start to heal not just your lifetime, but many lifetimes before of everything that's not serving?
I would say it's definitely not easy and it's still a constant battle. My mom still messages me every single day asking me to get off social media. Every single day. So
every day.
She's so triggered by me showing up. That's why I'm like, I can share more on your podcast than I can on mine, because she listens to all of it. Because, it's not only her fear, but it's also what's happening in Iran with the government there, that if you do speak about these things, like my family who still lives in Iran could be killed for it. Like I've had so many family members been taken to jail and tortured by the Iranian government. Both of my uncles were political prisoners in Turkey who, when they fled from Iran, they were taken for over a year and tortured by the Turkish government there. So what's crazy was my mom didn't even tell me her story about leaving Iran, like fleeing on foot, like the same way that people from Mexico come into the United States with a coyote and they, risk their lives. And it's like over a month of a journey. That was my mom's story of fleeing from Iran. Because just a little backstory, when the revolution happened in 1979, Iran went from like not a totally free country, but a country that women had rights to one that they don't. Like in Iran right now, you can actually legally kill your wife if you have any speculation that she's doing anything immodest. So like if you saw her like talking to someone you think she might be, cheating, you can legally kill her. Yeah.
That's still happening right now.
That is a law in Iran right now. Or another law in Iran is that because women are considered half of a human, in court, you need to have 2 female witnesses for every 1 male witness, because you can't really believe what a woman has to say.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Like if you get a divorce, and even if your husband was physically abusing you, the custody of your children goes to the husband. Like there are so many. If you wore lipstick, your lips were slashed off. You're not allowed to wear lipstick. You're not allowed to sing. You're not allowed to dance. It's if I went to Iran and I danced or I played music, I would be taken to jail and potentially killed.
Hold on, there's so much here to unpack. It's shocking. So, wow, I'm kind of stunned actually. This is
Yeah, people are like, oh, people in Iran are fighting for human rights, but they don't realize like the level of basic human rights.
Mm-hmm.
Like because I've been to Iran numerous times, I still have family there. Every single time I'm on the phone, I can hear them tapping my phone calls. Like it's a complete dictatorial state. Like, for example, a friend of mine just had a deck of cards in his stuff and they took him to jail because you're not allowed to play games. You're not allowed to have art. The only art you can have is a mosaic because that's like considered part of Islam. You can't have art with people's faces in it. So like your drawings, if they found them, you could be taken to jail and killed. So like this is this is where my whole family comes from.
Wow.
So for me, imagine like going from one extreme to, and it's a daily process for me too, but like to even just like show my face on social media, to even say my name on social media. There was so much fear around that. Then to show myself like speaking, like, oh my God, am I safe? Am I going to be okay? Are they going to kill my family? What's going to happen next? Then to dance on social media, to enjoy my body, to twerk on social media. It's like, so people might see that as like, oh, she's just like dancing and having fun, but it's like the ultimate fuck you to the patriarchy that's going on there.
It's already challenging enough to not have any of that background and to show up online in a liberated way, and how triggering it can be for so many people to just be singing or to dance or to enjoy your body, but in a more public way, whether it's even just like something just like this, like really basic. And that already takes so much because of external validation or, people like being triggered or haters coming into a vulnerable process around creative expression but then on top of that, the levels of suppression that we take for granted. When I say we, I mean, out in the West in a very, an experience of a great privilege to have this much freedom and liberation. And it really, really, really puts it into perspective. And I think that you are walking a really, really unique path in the sense that you have a very deep understanding of oppression and suppression. And yet you have focused your life's work around connecting people with their Dharma. So how do you believe the connection affects where we are over here in a liberated country for the most part, and being able to utilize our social media and our platform and also being able to share creatively? How do you feel like one person connecting with their Dharma today, connecting with what they were doing when they were 7 years old before they were told who to be by the world, what does that do in effect to those women that are standing up for their rights or for their survival, basically, to actually they're risking their lives to be able to even just have basic human rights? How do you feel like it all connects and interplays together?
Yeah, so I believe that my soul chose this exact situation that I was born in for this reason, that I wouldn't have this passion for it had I not come from a country where it is illegal to dance.
That's so shocking.
The fact that I came from that is why my soul is like, so I'm going to dance.
Right.
So I believe that was all part of it and part of the soul mission. And when you step into deeper levels of healing, your family, even if they don't agree with you, even if they're so afraid of what you're doing, are healing just by being bystanders of you. So just 2 weeks ago, I hosted an event for my institute, Dharma Coaching Institute, and I invited my grandma to come. And she was like, oh, I can't come, And I was like, no, you need to come. And she was in the crowd. And I just started telling the story because basically I was in this very toxic situation with my family and I had to leave. I had no money and I lived with my grandma right before the time that I met you. And I was 23, 24. And that's how I ended up in LA. And she definitely didn't understand what I was doing, writing a book on Ayurveda, but she always just let me be. So she came to my event 2 weeks ago and I brought her on stage. And she, for the first time in her life, held a microphone and was heard by anyone outside of our family, let alone 150 people. And she told her story.
Oh my gosh, I have chills all over.
And she told her story that I was a teenage mom and I never finished high school. I never got a chance to ask myself, what is my dream? I was always just taking care of the people, the men around my house. In a lot of Middle Eastern cultures, women don't have a name. Your name when you were a little girl is daughter of your husband. So let's say daughter of your father. So let's say my dad's name is Mahmoud. So my name would be daughter of Mahmoud. Then when I get married, my name is wife of Stephen. And then when I have a son, my name is mother of whatever my son is. So I'm never even seen as a human. I'm only seen in relationship to the men in my life. So imagine my grandma has grown up like this and then is given a microphone to a bunch of people who are like here to listen to her. And just that like changed. I think that probably when she dies one day will be one of the biggest memories of her life. So just little things like that of like the permission that you give to your family, even if they're afraid, then they can see someone from our bullshit, from our story, from our lineage was able to create a change. And that means it's possible for me too. And then beyond that, then the people, your colleagues, maybe those same people you're afraid of like, oh, if I step into my Dharma or if I even just show myself a little bit more, they're going to judge me. Mm-hmm. They might be at the beginning, but you're actually really inspiring them. I have so many people tell me, I was so triggered by you at first. And then later I realized it was because I had a side of myself too that wanted to be more liberated and expressed. And you were just reflecting that back to me. Mm. And then beyond that, people from your culture, your unique demographic. I have so many people in Iran who are like, I was protesting today and I'm going back and forth with them and I'm, sharing with them to keep going. So we don't realize just the ripple effects that happen from our family to our community, to our demographic, to our country, to the collective when we step into our Dharma.
Wow. Can you explain a little bit further about what you meant when you said that women are seen as a half human?
Oh, it's in the law.
Statement.
It's legally in the law. Recently, one of the clerics, one of the supreme leaders of Iran, he said there are 3 types of animals. There's the animal that you use to travel, such as camels that you put things on their back. There's the animal that you eat, such as cattle. And then there's the animal of the woman, and that's the dirtiest and most dangerous animal of all. This is one of the leaders in Iran said this recently. Women are not considered humans. Like people talk about the witch hunt, like that's actually still happening right now. And it's not just in Iran, it's in a lot of places around the world with female genital mutilation, with, how many young girls are sold into sex trafficking, with how many young girls are given up for adoption because their families can't afford their dowries in India, or because in China, with the one-child policy, you're going to choose a man over a woman. Like the patriarchy exists in every single culture. And it's not a male versus woman thing. It's just this idea ingrained in our society that male are superior to female. And that's just going to show up in everything. So what we see happening in Iran and in many places that have Sharia law as their law, it literally says this legally, and that prevents women from ever being in positions of power. I will say despite this, like the women of Iran have been fighting for the past 44 years now that we've been under this. And at first, their form of fighting was like makeup was outlawed. So they're like, we're going to put on makeup. And women, again, like if you had nail polish, they would put your hands in jars of spiders. So the spiders would bite your hands, but they kept doing it. And then they would put on lipstick again. They kept doing it. And then they would push their headscarves a little bit further back, a little bit further back, a little bit further back. And, they would go to jail. They would get beat up. Some of them would even be killed. But they said, if we all do this together as women, they can't take all of us. And then those very same politicians that used to do these atrocities to women, now in a lot of their commercials will have women wearing makeup and wearing nail polish. All because of, we call it the lipstick revolution. All because women using their beauty has become a form of political resistance. And it was crazy because when I was last in Iran a few years ago, I was just scared. Every single night I was having nightmares of like, what if I left the house and I didn't have a headscarf on? Like, what would happen to me? I would be killed. Like, what if I just forgot, And so every single time I would leave the house, I would like fully cover up, no makeup. I didn't want to draw any attention to me and be at risk. But my cousin was always like, what are you wearing? Like, you need to put makeup on. Like, you need to like put on like a little bumpet under your headscarf. Like everyone wears these bumpets there to show like I have volume of hair. And she's like, because if you don't, you're letting them win. So every single time a woman just stands in her beauty, stands in her expression, stands in her, I exist. I'm not going to be covered in this black cloak and pretend I don't exist. And the sad thing is, a lot of women have been brainwashed into believing that this is for our safety, of like, oh, well, men might be turned on by you and they might rape you. So if you cover up, you will be more safe. Like that's where the origins of this come from. But it's like, look at in many parts of the world, women are covered up, nothing but their eyes, and they're still being raped. They're still not respected. So it's like, what, do I have to just like become like a black hole for me to be safe in my body? Like, get your shit together. If you're so turned on by the sight of a woman's ankle, you're the one with the problem. And by the way, like when I first started going to Iran, I was forced to wear the headscarf since I was 7 years old. So even 7-year-old girls, they see as too sexual that even they have to cover their hair.
So it starts at 7?
Yeah.
I mean, before
legally
that...
it starts before 7. You don't have to wear a headscarf. You still always, everyone has to wear pants. You can't wear shorts. But girls can show their hair once they turn 7. You have to change your passport, change everything. I mean, in the schools every single day, they make you chant death to America. That's like part of the morning routine of all schools in Iran.
Really?
Yeah.
Death to America?
Yes.
It's part of
the morning routine of everyone gets together, they say the national anthem and they chant death to America. Like that's how much brainwashing there is. Every single school has like a picture of like the dictator of Iran and you have to like praise them every day.
Oh my gosh.
It's like full like North Korea status there. Yeah.
I mean, I basically with the movement happening specifically recently with a sister, a 22-year-old being killed for not wearing her hijab correctly. Yeah. And that has opened up the conversation and dove deeper into it through, I did an Instagram live, and during the Instagram live, we were talking about what's happening in Iran, and there was a sister that was on the live and she wrote, I'm currently tapped into a private IP account. I can access Instagram. I'm in the capital of Iran. I'd love to come on and share a little bit, but I have to cover my face because they may track me. So we had this moment on the live where I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening right now. This is right when it all started to pop off. And I brought her on and she was covering her face and she just had her eyes. And when I saw her eyes and I felt the frequency of her voice, it hit me in a way that we can almost become desensitized with the amount of things that are happening on the planet, whether it's happening over here or it's happening with this group, or is there then more killings over here? There's a school shooting. It's like, it's almost like we become desensitized to it because it's just like, it's constantly berating us. But when I saw her eyes and I felt her voice, it all of a sudden got really personal. And it hit me in a way that lit a fire in my ass. It was like, this is the paradigm shift that we have been talking about, that we've been preparing for. And it's really here right now. And it just so happens to be the front leading edge of the women in Iran right now that are risking their lives because they don't see a future worth living if it stays the way that it is. And you sharing with me like more of the details that I don't read in the articles, that it has been happening way before this surge is happening. But I'm curious what your perspective is, because I know that you're connected and you're friends with Deepak Chopra, and he did a video about what's happening with the women in Iran, and he spoke deeply into it being a paradigm shift. From your perspective, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's beautiful that this movement is happening through women, specifically young women. The average age of the people who are being killed right now for this is 16. So this is a revolution of high school girls leading the way. And that is so powerful because historically, when you think of a young woman, you think of her as like the least respected person in society. But the fact that she's actually the person who is the most courageous to go against this extremely tyrannical, dictatorial, patriarchal regime shows the power of the feminine, the innate power that we hold. And I think it opens up this conversation of what the feminine really is. Because in our Western society, especially the online spiritual tantric space, we're like, oh, the feminine is soft and submissive and open and receptive, and the masculine is the one that's strong and powerful and with a sense of purpose. But this is really showing us that the feminine is just as much that. You know, the feminine is also that Durga energy that fights for what is right for humanity and for her children. It's also that Kalima energy of like, fuck, I'm going to burn it all down if this is not serving me. It's the energy of Athena. It's the energy of just so many warrioresses throughout our time that I believe a lot of what we see as like feminine and masculine in this polarity space is just like patriarchy repackaged, you know? And for us to realize that the feminine offers such a strong sense of connecting to the collective, you know, in this greater way of even being willing to die for a cause, which again, I wish it did not have to be this way. And I wish we didn't have to, you know, I do believe in the paradigm of we don't need to be martyrs, but also we can't live in a bubble and we can't think like we're going to just have revolution through ease. It's actually just not the case. Like with any form of revolution comes facing your deepest fears. And to this level of like, I don't know what's going to be on the other side. And does that still matter to me enough? And I think us seeing the fact that high school girls who have like everything to lose, they have their futures to lose, they have everything to lose, are still so connected by the suffering of the collective that they are willing to stand in the face of centuries old wrath for all of their grandmothers and grandmothers and grandmothers who never got the choice and say, it ends with me.
You are articulating yourself in a way that is really hitting home with a desire, even more adding fire and passion into the desire to want to be of service to this cause. From my disposition, with my privilege, with the platform online, with this podcast, or with those that are really just listening to this in this moment and are really feeling like the weight actually of what is happening, what do you feel like is the most effective ways that we could be of support to this movement that's happening now?
Right now, the most effective way is just to be a voice. And I think right now, a lot of people are afraid of that because they're afraid of being labeled as performative activists, right? Of like, oh, what is me posting on social media really going to do? And I get that there was like, you know, the whole movement that happened in 2020 and people really questioning, is that real activism, performative activism? So I think a lot of people are afraid of being the voice for a cause that's like not their indigenous cause. I've noticed this. And the thing is, in Iran has been under like the harshest sanctions by the US government. So you actually can't donate money. Like there is no possible way to send money there. I wish there was, but there's no way. And imagine if there was like a house down your street and the father was abusing their child. And you're like, well, you know what? Like I don't have access to it. And you're just look the other way. The abuse is going to get worse and worse and worse. Mm-hmm. So by us not looking at it, not talking about it, it's very easy for this regime to just create a genocide. And they have done that in the past. The last time was in 2019. They killed 1,500 people in their college dorm rooms. Mm. So it's very easy to look the other way, but looking the other way could mean the genocide of all of these young women in this country fighting for basic human rights. So right now, even us just having this conversation is helping. It's keeping it in the collective pulse. It's keeping it in the collective eye. It's keeping it at the forefront. And even if we don't know, okay, what's going to happen next? Like there are different political steps, for example, different governments getting involved in freezing the bank assets of the Iranian regime and different aspects like that. But what we can do right now also is looking at the patriarchy within ourselves, the patriarchy in the collective, the patriarchy in the cultures that we come from. Because it's sometimes easy to say, well, that's happening to women in the Middle East, but there's no patriarchy here. But there is. I mean, we saw it with the overturn of Roe versus Wade. We see it happen in the pay gap. We see it happen again, even in the spiritual space. I have so many men every single day write me hate comments all the time of like, you should only be dancing in the privacy of your husband. Shame on you. Da, 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 da. And like, these are American men telling me this. So you see it happening all the time. So for us to be the voice for this greater cause, but then also being the microcosm of how is this showing up in my interpersonal relationships, in my culture, in my family.
So when you say the word patriarchy, would you mind breaking that down for anybody that may not know or fully understand what the patriarchy means?
Yeah. So the patriarchy is the concept that men are inherently superior to women. Mm-hmm. So it does not equate to men. It does not mean I don't like men, I am married. I'm like best friends with my brother. And I think that sometimes men do hear the word patriarchy and they take it very personally. But I think all of us could agree that men are not superior to women. There are some differences, but it doesn't mean that men should be in positions of power. And, the patriarchy really came to be in the past like 2,000 or so years with the onset of a lot of the Abrahamic religions. But if you looked before that, women were in many positions of power. Women were, medicine women, warriors, storytellers, leaders. But then what has happened with the distortion of religion is these texts have been rewritten to keep men in positions of power because of the fear, the inherent fear of the wisdom that women hold. And, you've done many podcasts about this, of the wisdom of our wombs and our menstrual cycles and our intuition and, that witch hunt where millions of women were killed in Europe during the Middle Ages for also being potentially a wise woman and in positions of power. So the patriarchy is not a men versus women thing. It can also be lived through women. So for example, I recently shared on my podcast that when I was 23, I was, living in India, going to all these spiritual, festivals. And I went to this Tantra festival, and this woman who was like in her 50s, she was like, okay, this workshop is going to be about opening yourself up to being a feminine channel. So you have to give a lap dance to these guys. And the guys were like these like 58-year-old like Russian men. And I'm like a 23-year-old, like very new to my journey girl. And even then I knew like there was something wrong with this, but she was like, oh, it just shows you're not quite open then because, we need to worship the masculine as the God and be able to see the God in every single person, and you be able to open yourself up as a channel for him. So you need to get rid of your personalization of him, but just be able to worship him as the divine. But it's like, again, the fact that my body is sending alarm signals of this doesn't feel safe because of the thousands of years of rape and suppression that have happened from older men to younger women. But again, we can take, even in the spiritual community, these like universal truths and then distort them through this patriarchal lens. And then what that looks like is people being basically told they need to cross their boundaries at these different Tantra things. And if they don't do it, it just means you're not open enough. So I think it's important even for the spiritual community to look at how we are, allowing this to continue to exist.
And as I keep saying, wow, like I it's been a minute since I've been able on the podcast and been pretty speechless. But this is like, you're laying it on like perfectly thick so that I can like really sit and just digest and a deeper appreciation for like the freedom that I have been given to express myself, B, the importance of it, C, the deeper understanding of what's happening outside of my bubble on a global perspective, the disconnect and the balance that is completely lost. And then also the programming behind the scenes through great religions that we are told from the moment that we're born and then think that this is truth and that yet wonder why we're so deeply numb or disconnected. And recognizing actually, even if we're in the United States, for example, there's still what I sense is that there's like an unsettled, anxious frequency that even if everything in our life is like great, and in my own personal world, everything's good, that subtle unease, subtle or maybe not so subtle, depending on your empathy levels, is the unease of the earth and how she's responding to how we are treating our mothers. The Mother Earth, the mothers that gave us life, and the importance of this needing to heal for us to be able to actually move forward as humanity. So what would you say about subconscious patriarchy that has been constructed within women's minds? And how to even detect that? Because there's the patriarchy that we witness externally, but then also just by being born on this planet and then geographically, depending on where you were born, to the degree of the patriarchy that is constructed. But within all of us, I think, even women, there is patriarchy that has been created within our construct of how we operate as a society.
I mean, it starts with the stories that we're told as children, watching Disney, these different fairy tales where the woman has to be chosen by the man, the fairest of them all. And how can I put myself in my maiden stage for the rest of my life? Because the maiden is innocent and she's naive and, she can be told lies. And many of us earlier in our experiences have fallen for these lies that we're told. And, for example, in the spiritual space, this happens a lot. Like a lot of men enter the spiritual space because they notice that young spiritual women are very open. They're willing to learn. They're willing to unlearn and question and even gaslight themselves around like, oh, well, this feels off in my body, but maybe it's because I'm not open enough. Maybe it's because I haven't done enough work. Maybe it's because of this. So I see it happen of these men taking advantage of these situations of saying, oh, like we had a past life together. And for us to heal this past life, like we have to have sex to break the bond of, like they use spiritual terminology like this. Or, again, going to these different workshops where you're kind of told, okay, now everyone needs to get naked and like do this thing. And it's like, there's no, maybe, there's consent talks, but it's like, if you were the one person to not be okay with it, you're singled out. So it's this idea of now to be open, it looks like this, but then oftentimes who's the person that it's serving, and that's really what we need to look at in the dating world. How can I make myself more small in every way, physically smaller, mentally smaller, spiritually smaller, so then I can fit and, again, be chosen, be the one who's good enough. And I think a lot of us, especially as women and people conditioned by this, are like waiting for someone to save us, and like life is so hard, but like once I find my man, then I'll be taken care of. And there is a beauty in the innate protection that I think that masculine beings tend to desire. And there are definitely differences of masculine and feminine, but as long as we have the concept of I need a man to save me, to complete me, to open me, to take me to the depths of myself that I can't go into by myself, that is the patriarchy.
And so that is an opportunity to really actually check in with ourselves in this moment. If we're listening to this, if we're watching this episode, to just check in of where does the patriarchy live within us? Whether we are in a male, a female, a them body, checking in with where does the patriarchy live within the construct of how I perceive myself. And even just you sharing, I'm thinking about being single in a space and there's a bunch of other single women and then a really handsome bachelor walks in and you can sense that there's almost like the patriarchy then will start to like pop up within the women's minds. It goes, oh, it's dog eat dog now. This is survival mode. Like I will survive when I partner myself with somebody that is successful, like maybe materially successful individual, then that survival mode starts to jump in and then want to be picked. And when you even just said some of those things from the Disney movie of like, oh, I'm the fairest of them all. This is rooted in competition as opposed to magnetism. And I talked about this actually recently on Aubrey's podcast, was he shared, well, what do you do then when you're in it? Because we're talking about competition. I don't resonate with the frequency of competition. And he was like, well, what competition must exist in a space where a young, handsome bachelor walks into the space and you've got a bunch of single women that are looking for their partner and he's like, got it all going on. All of a sudden the competition sparks within the women. And I said, well, I think actually the competition is the patriarchy that exists within our consciousness. However, the truest essence of empowerment is a recognition that when you look at the sperm and the egg is in its full fertile expression, not chasing, and just full embodiment. The sperm chases and competes with all of the other sperms, and they're like the fastest and the fittest make it to the egg. But the feminine within the masculine of the sperm and the egg is actually in the embodiment and the magnetism for that which is meant to be.
Mm-hmm. And new research also shows that the egg actually chooses the sperm at the end.
Oh,
so
really?
Yeah, we used to think it was just like the strongest sperm like swam its way to the top, but you could see it. If you just look it up online, you can actually see the video of it, and there's several sperm, and then the egg actually chooses the one that it wants to merge with. And that's the power that we hold as feminine. We think we need to be chosen, but we are actually the choosers.
In your words right now, I can feel my internal landscape that is just like a combination lock that just moved three.
We're like, what? I didn't have
three
to,
across.
Yeah.
So being like, actually, because also I've noticed, get to a certain age and, for example, not being in partnership and being a certain age as a woman, then the family conversations start going, well, I mean, you're going to have to find someone soon because you need to get pregnant and you have to have children and the body clock's ticking. And there's this like pressure that, well, the older I get, the less desirable I be to men. But then the older that I get and the less desirable, then the slimmer the chances are of me being able to actually bear a child. And that's my role or identity can be wrapped up in that I need to bear a child then for me to be a successful woman.
Yeah, because our wombs have been commodities.
And I'm in this conversation, I'm noticing the patriarchy in my own mental construct starting to just kind of crumble a little bit. And it does come down to the in-between moments of waking up and what's the first story I'll say to myself for the day.
Yeah. And this idea that once you're 35, you're not going to be able to get pregnant anymore. It's going to be very challenging. They actually looked at the research. Where did this research come from? And it was done in the late 1800s. So like what was the lifespan then? Like things were very, very different. So I would question like how true is that statement? Because I know a lot of people who are getting pregnant in their late 30s, their early 40s. I know a woman who naturally got pregnant at 45. So I think that it's important for us to even recheck these like scientific facts that we've received. I mean, even if you look at like the whole like gynecology field, it was basically created by men who believed that like women can't experience pain. So this like prodding of women's like most private parts and slashing out, parts of their cervix and saying, oh, you need to do it for this and that. Like there's a whole movement of really questioning where that came from. And also part of it too was this idea that Black women specifically couldn't experience pain. So they would do all of these horrific testings on Black women's bodies because again, from slavery, it was this scientific concept that Black people don't experience pain. So even things that we take as true and they're backed in research and science, actually much of it is not true. And it comes from, again, our patriarchal and racist conditioning.
Whew. It's still here. The witch hunt, racism, it's still here behind the scenes and being played out with people that actually do not have any awareness around motives that maybe have just been passed on because it's been just the way that it's done. Mm-hmm. So I think that actually the one thing that I have in common with the people that are, from my perspective, leaders that are my friends, you being one of them, is the courage to ask questions and to actually utilize the discernment of an intuition and your body's intelligence as opposed to what from the external in we've just been told our whole lives. So important. This is a really, really important conversation. So to give context of, everything that you know now, and you're very educated, like you've even thrown out dates here, like you've like got all the terminology locked in. I'm like, you're an academia, like you're an academic, like I can feel that. And it's really helpful to understand where we've come from, the workings of the history that has created this experience, which is now the place that we seem to find ourselves in, even in 2022. How do you feel that your creativity ties into this liberation piece? Because even just when you arrived for this podcast, you bought a little bag and you could have bought me flowers or nothing. Obviously, I wasn't expecting anything, but like could have also bought me a Tiffany necklace, but you didn't. No, no. So you brought this beautiful gift and I opened it and it was to make your own custom friendship beads, bracelets. And for me, creativity actually is one of the highest states that we can access. Not necessarily because it's goal-orientated, but process-orientated in the vibratory state that our body gets into when we're creating. How do you feel like creativity is a part of the resistance?
Creativity is the inherent state of the feminine. And that is what the patriarchy has been so afraid of, because when we are creative, we see other possibilities, we ask questions, and then we can even create art out of the pain that we're in. So, I talk about everything that I've shared about the woman in Iran, et cetera, not from a place of like, okay, like let's change lives. That's part of it. But it's like, I want those girls to be able to sing. I want them to be able to dance. I want them to be able to create bracelets that have words on it and not be taken to jail for that. Because that to me had been the highest states of my life as well. You know, throughout my life when I was a kid, making up stories and dancing and using my imagination and being here with you right now. And we're tuning into this creative field that everyone listening right now is in us, in this vortex right now. And for me, that is being a channel. You know, that is allowing yourself to be the vessel for the source consciousness that is streaming through us. And then I believe that these ideas exist in the collective, but then they choose the vessels that they can come through. So, you know, every single one of us is attuning to all of these different collective ideas, whether it is the rising of the feminine, whether it is living your Dharma, et cetera. But then our channel, our creativity is what adds our frequency to it. It's what makes it relate to the exact people that it's meant to connect with. And beyond that, it's what allows us to experience joy. And for me, joy really is the whole purpose of all of this. To be able to connect with your truest nature. You know, they have the koshas in the Vedas, which are the layers of our being. And our truest nature is Anandamaya kosha, which is bliss. That is who we are despite this all. And, you know, sharing everything that I've shared, it can be very easy to go into dark rabbit holes, which I go down all the time too, don't worry. And to find our way, the yin and the yang of like, now how can I find beauty in this? In Iran, there are underground art galleries. There are underground spoken word poem slams. There are underground rappers and all of these things. So even through that, creativity thrives. It becomes stronger. It's like, let me find the nooks and crannies that I can find my way through and still express what I'm experiencing right now in a way that goes far beyond the logical mind. Because if I hear a song about something, it's going to hit a chord with me so much deeper than if I just read some stats about it. And this is why I believe creativity is really the next frontier, even of our healing journey. Because so often in our healing journeys, we can also get caught up in the, well, now I need to heal my family, my childhood, my ancestral lineage, my relationships, my this, my that. And like, there's forever going to be more to heal. Like it is a never ending well. But how did we naturally heal for centuries? Through storytelling, through drumming, through song, through dance, through getting outside. Like, did you hear the story about the tribe in Rwanda who kicked out the American psychologist?
No, but please tell.
So after the Rwandan genocide, the US government sent a team of their top psychiatrists and psychologists to work with the victims of the genocide. And after a few days, the tribe kicked them out. And the government was like, what did you just do? We just sent you our top team of psychologists and psychiatrists. Like, these are people to help you navigate the trauma. And they're like, no, I think you sent the wrong people. Because these people, they wanted to take us by ourselves away from our tribe and sit in a dark room and keep talking about what happened. And that's not how we heal in Rwanda. We go outside under the sun and we join hands and we sing and we dance and we heal together. And just allowing even that to land of, does healing even need to look like what I've been taught healing needs to look like? Do I need to keep analyzing the problem again and again and again from a 20th perspective? Or can I sing? Can I dance? Can I make art? Can I weave baskets? And maybe I'll talk about it, maybe I won't. But there are higher levels of healing sometimes that happens when we separate ourselves from what has happened to us and become who we have been throughout all of those experiences. And again, that is our true nature.
It's a really great story to reflect on, that this is a frequency game still. And if we sit in a dark room and we go over the pain and the suffering, then we're continuing to marinate in the frequency of that memory, as opposed to creating an energetic forward moving motion, which goes, oh, we remember and we forgive, to create the fertile soil for the energy moving forward, from the frequency of nature and play and song and community and unity and connection and oneness and equality, is the only way that we can actually create a new narrative moving forward. It reminds me when I went on my birthright and I went to Israel, and we were at the Holocaust Museum, and there was a Holocaust survivor that was sitting at the front of the stage. And he was talking about, all of the horrific things that had happened. And I remember he's kept repeating it. Never forget, never forgive. Never forget, never forgive. And he got everyone chanting, never forget, never forgive. And everything in my body was like squirming. And of course, I haven't gone through the Holocaust experience myself. It has affected my family, but not in a horrifically drastic way. So there is a deeper level of empathy that could be accessed that is not available in my experience. I take that into account, while at the same time, never forgiving doesn't feel like the soil that can actually grow new life in it. It feels like the soil's still dead, because it's still in that bitterness of the past. And it's like, never forget, because we've got to understand where we came from. Like, the education of what you're sharing with me about what's happening in Iran, and your knowledge and your personal direct influence of how it's affected your life and also fed your Dharma, is a byproduct of not forgetting. It's actually put so much power in everything that you create because you haven't forgotten. But I believe what makes you so approachable and creates the revolution to be irresistible in your own right is that you have forgiven and are willing to do with what you have been given in this life to alchemize as much of that oppression into liberation, not just for yourself, but for the countless humans that you've impacted through the many different outlets that you've given yourself permission to access. How do you feel when I say about the creative process around creation for the moment as opposed to goal-orientated? So process-orientated creation as opposed to goal-orientated creation, and the importance of that for anybody that's listening that doesn't identify as an artist, or doesn't identify as a singer, or doesn't identify as a dancer, or any of these expressions, but also recognizing the emphasis that this is directly hand in hand with the healing path of being able to access this and to start to nurture the feminine that lives within all of us while we are at the same time deconstructing the patriarchy.
So I would just look at what were the things that, again, you loved to do at some point of your life. Maybe you were a very young child or a teenager, because we all have creative pursuits, whether we fully, for some families, they weren't allowed to honor their creativity. So maybe you haven't, but what were the things you always wish that you could do? So for example, my father was never allowed to be creative at all. And when you speak about the topic of forgiveness, my grandfather forced my grandmother to be in the child marriage. So for so long, I was like disgusted at the thought of my own grandfather of like, he literally like took a young girl against her will and forced her to be his wife. Like, that's so fucked up. And also I'm here because of that, so how can I forever be angry at the very thing that gave me life? So on that topic of creativity, my dad never got a chance to be creative. It was only about academics. And I recently had a dream. This was like a month ago. And in the dream, it was like a group of us in our family. And we were all like doing all these different artistic things. And my dad came in the room and he was angry. And he's like, I'm resentful that I never got to be creative. And then we all started like loving on him. We're like, because of you, our entire lineage got to move to the United States, and you helped us find stability, and you helped us with this. And we were just loving on him in this dream. So I don't have a very close relationship with my dad, but I felt called to tell him this dream. So I called him now in real life, and I told him this dream. And he's like, that's so interesting, because I've always held a lot of resentment that I never got to learn the violin. He's like, when I was a kid, our neighbors had a violin teacher, and I would always hear them outside, but I was never allowed to do anything creative. And I always just held this resentment of like, what could have my life looked like if I just knew how to play the violin and express myself in that way? So it could just be the thing that you like wish you always wanted to do, or say it's too soon for me to be this in this lifetime, or it's too late for me to be this in this lifetime. So for example, with me in DJing, like didn't really fit into like the author speaker, that genre. But I've always just felt like, wow, it's so cool to be able to create an experience for other people and create the frequency and you're taking people on this journey through music, and sometimes music can just go so much deeper than words. So then I thought, oh, like, I don't know, maybe I'll like date DJs. Like that was like the closest thing in my early 20s, right? And then I realized, well, why don't I become the person I want to date, become the DJ? And now I'm able to create that experience. And, you know, for someone else, it could be, I've always wanted to be a dancer and, you know, but I've never danced. I have 2 left feet. You can always just start this right now. And the beauty of creativity is creativity inherently can't have a goal because then it's not creativity. You know, if you're like, my goal is to be performing at this thing, you're no longer channeling your creativity. You're using creative acts in a productive way. So like, I believe just this whole concept of goals really needs to be revisited. My personal goal is to have no goals. I just don't resonate with goals, but instead just letting myself channel the expression that's meant to come through me. And that's the beauty of practices like ecstatic dance or kirtan or different forms of expression. It's not about hitting the choreography or hitting the note or getting it right in this way. It's about letting yourself be in the flow and the channel, the river of source consciousness. We call this kriya in Sanskrit. Kriya is the flow that you experience when you are living in alignment with your Dharma. And that's really what creativity is.
It reminds me of yesterday. We were standing in the kitchen, and Rachel's here for a week intensive behind the scenes of building the podcast out and all of the good stuff. And I asked her about singing. You know, I was like, "You sing, right?" She's like, "I mean, no, not like out loud, you know." And as soon as I hear that, the way that my mind is constructed is I see an opportunity for a deeper level of liberation in the presence of somebody that I think is so fabulous, and I want more of her out in the world in however and many outlets as possible. So when she was like, "Oh, I don't really, you know, sing," I said, "Do you mind if I share this?" Yeah. You know, raised in a family that like are really good at like music, and so then when I would sing, it was like not as welcomed in the space, and so it created this belief system or this like construct that like, oh well, then maybe that's just not my avenue. However, for me, how my brain is set up now is that, and it never used to be back in the day, but it's set up in the sense of, we sing to liberate ourselves. It's not necessarily about sounding good. And so to be able to sit on these hands and to have this conversation is a conversation that is a byproduct of an open throat chakra, the ability to articulate what is going on in the inner workings. Now that's directly linked with how much permission I give myself to sing, whether it's in the shower, like I'm, you know, putting my lotion on and I'm like, like I'm just like doing the thing. But I find that it directly ties in with women being able to speak their truth, set their boundaries, deconstruct the patriarchy within their own consciousness is direct measure of singing in the shower. Like it's actually, there's a golden thread that's tied in with all of this, that then being able to say no is a little bit more like lubricated. Like it's not as much like, it's like more flowing through, and then actually saying, actually, no, that doesn't feel good. Whether it's being in a sexual interaction with someone and then all of a sudden losing your voice and it's not what you want, but you want to please them and you feel like that's part of your role is to please them. But then the voice gets shut down. All of a sudden at the end of it, I feel like so disconnected of what happened. It's all linked to creative expression, I believe. And so I think whenever I hear somebody say, I don't sing or I don't dance or like, that's just not what I do, I'm not buying it. And I also want to meet them where they're at and honor that part of the process, but also at the same time, invite into a deeper level of liberation, not for the goal, but for the process itself. You've seen the movie Soul, right?
Mm-hmm. So
and then
good.
the creative flow,
Yes.
and they go into that blue space.
So
it's like,
good. I'm like, why did they not have these movies when we were kids?
I know, right?
That was like literally the Dharma discovery journey in a movie right there. And yeah, I agree with you. The level to which we can speak our truth is the level to which we can karaoke. Like it's one and the same.
Yeah,
you know?
it's so true.
Like, if you can't just sing some like shitty Tony Braxton, how are you going to assert your boundaries? You know, you just need to be like, unbreak my heart, say you love me again. Undo this hurt that you caused when you walked out the door and walked out of my life. That's like my go-to.
That's your go-to. That's your karaoke go-to.
So I just took the opportunity to let
Damn, we
someone
need
in.
to set up a karaoke night. What are we doing?
Yes.
Oh my
karaoke
God.
podcast. But it's so true. I was one of those people who would say, I'm not a good singer because I couldn't hit the notes. And look, we grew up watching freaking American Idol. It's like, you suck. Like, you should be laughing at yourself. And like, so we were taught from, you know, like the Simon Cowell was like the biggest celebrity. And so we're taught like you either have the voice or you don't. And it became all about the performance. And the performance is dictated by this like arbitrary judgment that, you know, even what's a good singer doesn't even exist culturally. What makes someone a good singer in India is very different than what makes someone a good singer in Morocco or South Africa or Iran or wherever else. So why are we setting ourselves up to these standards that like aren't even true? They're just made up.
Yeah.
By the way, when you sang at Colibri Spirit Fest, it was Reggie's song circle, and then you came at the end and you sang your song, which was this like biblical song that like I later realized I was like trying to find it. And I was like, wait, sounds so different than the way that you sing it. Because the way I was crying, like I was moved to tears just from the level of resonance that I felt in your voice. Can you share what were the lyrics of that song and like what was coming through you? Just because watching it, I was feeling so much. I was like feeling your story, but the collective story of just like how in life there's just so much uncertain, but all we can do is hold on to hope.
I was so happy that you were there during that experience. It was a really special experience. Yeah. Just to give like a little bit of context, Reggie facilitated a beautiful song medicine workshop at Colibri Spirit Festival in Greece that we attended to together. And at the end, Reggie looked over at me and was like, Blue. And they like played with the guitar, and I was like, you know, whenever those opportunities present themselves, it gets easier the more times I say yes. But at the beginning, I remember it was like, like everything. My face would go red, my palms would go sweaty, my voice would shake. I wouldn't hit the key, but it was about showing up and doing it anyway, and being the voice of the desire to creatively express myself, be louder than the voice of fear. And then on top of that, for the past 7 years, my journey with my hearing is that it's been like rapidly, or like, I want to be really careful about the spells I place around it, but my hearing sense has been decreasing to a point where I haven't actually fully been able to hear my own voice. But there's been this song, and it's super interesting because it's a Hillsong Christian song, and I really love the song, but there's one sentence in it that says, in the presence of my Savior. And even in that
like chills
expression, I'm like, is that the patriarchy? That there's a savior outside of myself? Like, yes, there is God, and there is like the benevolent force that created this reality and worlds that we find ourselves in. And that is something so much bigger than myself. Yes, 100%. That's what I resonate with. Yeah. And saying that there's a savior that's going to come save me, and that I need to repent my sins to the savior, my body like starts to.
So how can we rewrite that word?
Well, I rewrote it to the creator. In the presence of the creator, as opposed to my savior. Yes. And so it shifted the song that allowed me to receive the medicine, because the medicine of that song is potent. And it's basically the
what are the rest of the lyrics? Can you please just
Spirit
sing it for us?
Lead me. Spirit lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you may call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of the Creator. And so those, like,
Spirit lead,
Spirit lead me. You know, it's like, lead me. Mm-hmm. Take me deeper than I could even ever wander, and allow my faith to be the thing that drives me through the times where I don't understand what the fuck is going on. There was times when I was on my knees, like, why am I going deaf? Like, this is so heartbreaking. And the only thing that has guided me through some of the toughest times of my life has been this faith in a higher orchestration of the benevolent reality in which we live, and that I may not understand it at the moment, but 100% of the time it has worked out in that favor, in my favor, in everyone's favor, up until this point. And so when Reggie asked me to come sing that song, the charge that you're feeling behind it is being led by a higher power in the times where I don't understand what is going on, And for the first time in my life, or in the past 7 years, since my hearing started decreasing, I got hearing aids and I could hear my voice again. So I'm now showing up in the vulnerability of sharing my voice, hearing my voice for the first time in 7 years, singing a song that guided me through the toughest times of my life. And it felt like in that moment, everything had come full circle for me to receive the gift of why it happened in the first place. And what I've realized is that when I put my hearing aids in, not only do I hear my own voice, but I also feel my own voice. Because when my sense of hearing was decreased, my extrasensory perception of feeling exponentially increased. And so it's the unspoken realms. And that's what I believe is what makes music, medicine music, or just, top of the pops kind of experience, is where it comes from. And when it comes from, I've gone on a journey and I have faced off with all of my unworthiness. And in those spaces where I am on my knees, even when my voice cracks, I sang. And I sang every day for months. When I couldn't trust, that song reminded me of the benevolent reality in which I live. And through singing that song, it is charged with the frequency of healing, that then it will touch the hearts of others and reduce them to tears. Not because I'm riffing like Beyonce and I got all the technicals down and my voice is actually like really great. Like, it's not necessarily about that. It's more so about, where did I have to die into to birth that through my body? And how can I, with the courage, offer it to you as a prayer, not a performance? And the vibrational shift, that's what, when I hear someone sing, it's not even about them hitting the notes. It's where they're singing from that I get shivers all over my back. And I'm like, Mama, like, please sing another song on chord. So thanks for asking about that little moment and that experience. It was such a gift to be able to share it with you. And it was definitely one of those like pinpoint moments in my journey. Be able to share that.
It was so beautiful to witness, because for me, like, I could feel part of what you were going through, and like that question of like, how could someone with such a beautiful voice be losing their hearing? Like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And I think that sometimes we try to make life make sense in all these like perfect ways, and to just be like, I don't know, but look at what she's creating from it. And just to like be in that witness of your trust, and to hear your backstory of the levels of feeling that it's taken you deeper into is like, oh, okay. I don't know if it makes sense, but it's making sense, of like, I don't know why bad things happen to good people, And I think that the deeper we go on this journey, we just have to realize like, I don't know. I wish it was like this perfect like karma, like this happens, so that happens. And it's like, you're all like leading up to here. And it's like, and it's not. Sometimes it's just so uncertain and and that's the feminine, to just not know and to trust, but look at what you're creating from it.
Thank you for saying that. I feel like everyone on this planet, no matter where we were born, no matter with what parents, we've all been dished some really difficult cards and hand in this sort of game of life. And ultimately, I don't believe that it's about what has happened. It's about what we do with it. And the only person that can make that choice is from within. And we can be guided and we can be inspired and we can be led to water, but no one can make us drink. And ultimately, it doesn't matter how much money we have, or what religion we're born into, or where we are around the planet. If we are still breathing, we have the power to choose to how we respond to certain external circumstances. And I believe that is the message that's pretty much like the one I really stand by, is how can we alchemize the pain of the world into forgiveness, and forgiveness into beauty. And I think that creativity within everybody is one of the most important pieces for the healing of this planet. And so I love the way that this direction of this conversation has gone, because we say a prayer at the beginning and we say like have little pointers, but where it wants to go is like totally in
Spirit
lead us. Come on now. And it's so beautiful because it's addressed a really ripe, important conversation with Iranian sisters and what is happening with this movement, deconstructing the patriarchy, and how it directly ties to also the lighthearted playfulness of a child or an eternal child, an adult. The creative adult is the child that survived. And the importance of how it actually really does connect and interlaced. And when I was really feeling what was happening in Iran, and just like I was going through a really heavy death portal myself, the intuition I got was, instead of crying in a dark room, go down to the beach and dance ecstatically to your favorite songs and let that be your prayer and let that be your contribution. And so I'm really grateful for the way that you are holding such deep wisdom and understanding and education and embodiment around what is happening, but also the way that you show up and you're choosing to alchemize it into such lighthearted play, creativity, twerking, dancing, DJing, expression, ceremonies. And I remember when we were in Greece, we'd be in the car and everyone's chatting and there's like so many little microclimates happening all at once. And every time, without fail, every day, you always brought us back, what is your intention for the day? And what was the highlight of your experience from last night, for example? And you would always bring us back to a place of intention and ceremony and connection and unity and listening and reverence and support and wisdom and inspiration. And it was just this incredible asset in this space. And so just getting a little bit of an understanding of what it is that you've been able to transmute in your life and the way that you choose to show up is so deeply inspiring. And it's such a gift to be able to hear more of you on the podcast today.
Well, it was the perfect timing to be here and the exact conversation that needed to come through. And I'm excited to see the ripple effects that happens after this conversation of all of the little seeds it has sprouted in so many people listening to this and their unique demographics and the circles that they can affect, and being those lighthouses again of creating, the beautiful sun rays that we need every single part of the world. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share. And I'm so excited to see just the creative blossomings that unravel as a result of this conversation.
Media's medicine.
Should we end with a karaoke song?
Yeah. We can just
What's
do
your go-to karaoke?
Behind the scenes, you just crush it on the karaoke. I'm actually really here for that. Yes. So if people are listening to this and they're like, wow, okay, really want to continue to follow you along with your journey, and just that you have like so many podcast episodes that are so nutrient dense, and can have the power to change people's lives after one episode, let alone like the amount of seasons that you've done. You've been in the game for a hot minute, right? With the podcast.
5.5 years.
5.5 years. Okay, yes. There's a lot. There's a gold mine. She's sitting on a gold mine right here. So if you're resonating with this, then how can people find you through social media and your YouTube and the different platforms you have?
Yeah, so my website, IamSaharaRose.com, has everything there. People can take a quiz to discover their unique Dharma archetype. My podcast is called Highest Self Podcast. And I have lots of free, practices, embodiment practices, and a lot more on my website. So you can just head over there, and it's the same handle on Instagram and TikTok.
Incredible. Thank you so much for making it all the way up here and for offering the greatest gift you can ever give anybody, which is your time and your presence. So beautiful to receive you. And I can't wait to be making my friendship bracelets, by the way. I'm so excited about that.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. To all of you beautiful.
Peace, love, unity, respect.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. How do we do it?
So it goes.
Peace.
Peace is this one.
Peace.
Love. Unity. Respect. And then you share the bracelet, and then my bracelet goes over to you and you go over to me. Oh, by the way, your nails are fabulous, but that's a different topic.
I love it.
So this is the candy, they're called candy bracelets?
Yeah, unity, respect.
Yeah. Peace. One more time. Peace. Love. Unity, respect, and then here's my bracelet.
The bracelet.
That's
so
great.
We should do this to everyone.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
My birthday's coming up, and I think that making a bunch of bracelets and doing that as an offering on my birthday would be a great idea.
Totally. Everyone making their own like words that they want to give out.
Yeah. Oh, so good. My dog's really feeling the energy right now. She's just going nuts over the side of the podcast. If you're listening to this on audio, I don't know if you'll be able to hear her, but she's making quite the noise. She's just really feeling the energy. And if you're watching on video, you probably might see her in the bottom. Anyways.
I love how dogs do that. And they like sit up like nothing just happened.
Yeah, she's like, I'm just shamanically transmuting some energy from the space. You're welcome. All right, beautiful humans, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Deja Blu podcast with Sahara Rose. If you resonate with today's episode and you feel like this could really benefit the people that you love, or there's anyone that specifically comes to mind, then please feel free, share it, spread it, utilize it, and put it on your Instagram stories and to share it in a good way, because we can only reach so many people, but by utilizing your platforms as well, we can reach this message far and wide and recognize this is a really important conversation. And I want to leave you with the question of how can you creatively express yourself more today? And how can you go to bed tonight and do something that you hadn't yet accessed the day before? An opportunity to be able to liberate yourself in ways that you have been maybe hiding behind a story saying that you're not an artist. Well, I want to challenge you on that one and invite you into your little inner layers of being an artist and see how you can live to blow your own mind, and recognize also that when you creatively express yourself, you're also contributing to the rebalancing of the energies on the planet. It's a win-win. Why not? Until next week, thanks for tuning in. I'm sending you so much love.